you guys have met me already virtually from the description that was given. I worked with Lumix for about 5 or 6 years as a luminary and or ambassador, depending what you call it. Successful commercial photographer and artistic photographer in Sedona, Arizona. And this is not my first rodeo, so hopefully I'll be able to share some stuff with you. Try and serve up all the knowledge in my head, and boy, sometimes you wouldn't want to go in there without a gun and a flashlight. Okay, so with that said, some of the things we're going to talk about today are the tools that we work with. I've gone back and forth a lot of times in the way I support my camera. And so I'm going to give you a quick little video here so we're not bouncing back and forth too much. I've got a little quick keynote to talk about a couple of ideas. I'm going to show you some equipment that I use and some ways that I use that may be a little bit different. And then I'll go back in and do some Photoshop and some post-production. We were talking about macro earlier on, and somebody was talking about having a magnifier on the front of their lens. One of the things you can do if you don't want to invest big time and you're not going to do a lot of macro photography is just get extension tubes. For the Micro Four Thirds system, I think these were like either 49 or 79 bucks for 2 of them. They can turn any lens that you have into something that will put the surface of the lens much closer. It'll magnify it on the lens just by moving your lens away from the camera. So looking at that. So, and another thing that I do is what I call macro. So I take a macro lens and I put an extension tube or tubes on that and come up with things like this. So when I say macro, this was a 45 millimeter, which would be a 90 millimeter similar field of view as full frame. And if you look at this is a pretty good sized image. That little bud was the size of my pinky fingernail. So just to give you an idea of the kind of detail that you can pull up and play with, and then with a little bit of extra post-production, you can kind of take it to a next level with a little bit extra sharpening, a little bit of contrast and things like that. Some tools to play with that we're not going to get into today, but I just want you to be aware of if you're not already using them and you do landscape photography. Luminosity masking is absolutely amazing in being able to grab just certain luminous areas. Ansel Adams would have gone crazy being able to pick specific, I want to just dial in and either darken or lighten this particular value within the image. It would have made him crazy. If you go to shutterevolve.com, there's a guy named Jimmy McIntyre. He's, I think he's over in London now, but he was in either Australia or New Zealand. And there is a free luminosity masking setup that you can get from him. And then he also has a much more involved and deep thing. So what luminosity masking does, you're able to select just certain tones, and this is darks 1, darks 2. You'll hear that brought up by people on a regular basis if they talk about the luminous information that's in there. So if you had clouds that were just on the edge of being blown out, you could very easily just kind of pull some of it in just a little bit. So that's always kind of a cool thing. I'm not going to get crazy on that, but luminosity masking is something that you want to know about. Focus stacking is a huge, huge deal. I'm going to play that video again. So it's a little video, and basically, whoops, wrong way. So with the Panasonic cameras, they have a setup where when you push the button, it will use every focus point in the camera and make a frame from it. And then you can put them all together. Oh, let's go back one more. Am I going the wrong way? There we go. So let's look at that again. Watch this go. So basically it's just racking right on through. And for every focus point that's in the camera, there's now a video frame. So in the camera, you can then say, I want to process this image out, and I want from here to be in focus. And you can pick the focus points and say, go ahead and process that image out as a complete image, and just give me the sharp bits where I asked for them. It's a pretty cool little thing. The best part is that you can now also do focus stacking with raw files. So you're able to go through. So so here's all the frames pulled out individually. And then, so here they are shown in Bridge. And you can load all of those files into Photoshop as a stack. And I'm going to show you how to do that, you know, as we get back into the Photoshop a little bit later. So once they're all layered in the stack, then you go ahead and, oops, wrong way. Then you come up to the edit mode, and under edit, you have auto blend layers. And what you want to do is tick the stack images box, seamless tones and colors. And if you wanted to finish off the edges for you, you can go ahead and tick this box, and it will actually, where the images are slightly offset because they're slightly different sizes, then it will fill in the edges using the content awareness. And then, boom, once you go there, you go to the next part, and it will actually make the masks, leaving just the sharp bits behind. And then you'll end up with something like that. No grasshoppers were harmed in the filming of this commercial here, or this, this piece. Now, I had detail all the way back into here, but just as we like to have, you know, nice bokeh for our subjects, that being soft in the background, I chose to leave those areas in the back out of focus. But look at all the little detail in the hairs here, in the hairs here, the little edges. The depth of field is absolutely amazing, and the detail that you can pull when you're doing a system like this is pretty cool. Here's a similar one with the rose, and the rose is being in focus all the way from here. Now it's going back here, back here, back here, back here, back here, and boom, it's done. So now those are all in the camera. We take them all into Photoshop, and or in the case of the Lumix cameras, since they're using video frames, you can only get a JPEG out of it. In the original cameras, you were able to get an 8 megapixel file, and in the newer cameras, you can get an 18 megapixel file. And again, this is what it looks like once you've stacked it and allowed Photoshop to make all your masks for you, to blend it all together. And you can come up with something like that from that image. At that point there, then you can take that image and go on to another place using like some Nik filters, being a little bit more artistic, adding some edges and things like that. Ellen, we have any questions so far? I will assume not.
Hang on, I'm looking. No. No.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat box, right, Ellen?
That's right.
Okay, so just drop them in there, and Ellen will give me a little stop. And if I'm going too fast or too slow, let me know.
Okay, sweet.
So one of the other things that I'm talking about today is landscape. And I know you have a program coming up on panoramas, but I've already put my program together, so I get to go first. So this is probably, I'm thinking, 6 images stitched together. And we're going to talk about ways to capture this so that you can put your panorama together and get the most file that you can possibly get out of it. I print this currently as a 70-inch print, and it's about 24 by 70. And it's actually quite cool because in various lighting conditions, so if you turn the light up or down in spotlights and stuff, it totally changes and looks like sunset's happening. It's a pretty cool effect. Again, stitching your panoramas together. I'm going to be talking about some techniques for that and some of the equipment that it takes to do it right. Some of it costs a lot of money if you really want to do it a lot. Some of it just costs a little bit of money if you want to buy some of the off-brand stuff. Okay. Tracking, and we're not actually talking about this, but this was in my keynote here, so just mention it real quick. Chasing birds and things around is much easier when you're using a gimbal on your tripod. And if you have a gimbal head, it makes it a lot easier to track down the birds. In this particular case, I've isolated each one of the birds and then decided how I wanted them to go. Initially, I was going to put the birds together and have them, I saw this starting to appear in my head. I call it Dance of the Snowy Egret. I wanted to have them in the swamp, like you see here in the marsh, but gosh, blending all those edges together and trying to make it look right was making me crazy. And sometimes you have a happy accident. Because I had everybody isolated, I saw it in this stark fashion and just went, oh, I get it now. So if you ever want to do something like this, these reflections, which anchor them into the scene and allow them to be in their space, is a thing called flood. It's a flood filter, and it allows you to make all different kinds of water. It's a pretty amazing thing. I think it's about 35 bucks, and it's available from flamingpear.com. Here was another one. I tried to track these birds for years, hand holding my camera. Finally had a nice gimbal and caught this guy coming across. Even with a gimbal, there's still going to be other birds that pop into the scene, etc., or trees that are there, or the bird doesn't run completely straight across the frame, which can make you absolutely insane because you're like, oh, I almost had it. Oh, I almost had it. So I finally chased this guy down. And the day I got it, I was like, oh, I got him. I hope it's in focus. And luckily it was. So again, everything was extracted. A watercolor background and art background was built. The flood filter, again, was used to make the reflections on the water. And then it was posted into an art piece there. Okay, I'm just going to throw this at you. This is one of my personal bugaboos and favorite things to talk about and share with photographers and save them lots of heartache. We won't talk about this, but you want to make sure that you have a clone drive of your main computer. So your main computer has your programs and your applications and your operating system. And pretty much that should be all you have in there for the most part, if you can. That keeps it nice and clean so that Photoshop and other programs have elbow room to work. Keep your files off of your main computer. But the main thing is you want to clone, not copy, clone, because you can take a drive out of your, if your main computer takes a dump, which at some point it will or can, you'll have to go find all your operating system, get that reloaded. You'll have to find your programs. You have to find all those codes and numbers, and getting your software up and running again can make you absolutely insane and take you weeks to get back going. If you have a clone of your drive, you take that, you put a new hard drive in your computer, you clone from your clone copy, put it back into your computer, and by the time it's done copying, you're back up and running totally free. So you can find, there's the link here to learn more about that. And now we will stop sharing for the moment. We doing okay?
Yeah, it's all good. Hey, Bob, I just have a question for you. So which cloning software do you use?
I'm on a Mac, so I use the Bombich software, which is Carbon Copy Cloner.
Okay.
There are other softwares for other computers. I don't know anything about the PCs and what's the proper one. But again, you want to clone so that you have a working bootable copy, not copy. Okay. So let's talk about gear a little bit. We kind of, sometimes we forget some of the little things. I heard somebody talking a little bit earlier that they liked the lightness and the small thing. That's what got me into Micro Four Thirds. And I took a camera with me to France. I had already bought and sold 3 different point and shoots because my wife was like, why are you carrying 35 pounds of gear with you on vacation? And I'm going like, what's your problem? You're not carrying it. And she said, well, neither are you, because you're leaving it in the room because the stuff is too heavy. I was like, yo, women are just so smart. So in my search for finding a camera that was light enough to take around with me and to use, I moved into the Micro Four Thirds world with the Lumix GH2. And basically, I had this bag, which is quite small, as you can see, just wearing it, you know, on my belt, and a camera on my shoulder. And it was with me for the entire 2 weeks of the trip. It never left my side. I never missed an image, and it was great. Now, you can't carry a tripod with, oh, wait, yes, you can. Here, but there's a tripod. Okay, now I know this seems really weird, but this tripod helped me make pictures of cathedrals in Europe. Okay, so basically, I joke a little bit about it, but this lives in my bag and it supports the camera. So you can have it on the ground for sure, but you say, Bob, I don't want to just shoot from the ground. Okay, then stick it up against a tree, put it on a car hood, put it up on a mailbox, so there's, you can have it do a lot of things to help you support your camera if you're not going to have your full tripod with you, again, for travel stuff. You can now get like 5 of these for $6 or something. I'll send you, I have a set of links that I'll send you for all the things that I'm talking about. And by the way, I saw somebody was using a Lume Cube. You can also put your little lighting in here, so you can stick this in the back of places and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. So again, small tripods. Let's move up another little size. When I'm out on the trails, I really got tired of hauling a big tripod around with me. It made me crazy. So a few years ago, or maybe a year and a half or so, I bought what they call a Platypod. And this is the Platypod Ultra. It's a small one, but this little unit right here will support 11 pounds and only weighs 11 ounces. So again, with the pouch that I wear on my belt, I now just have it hanging on the side there, and it is awesome. So along with it, we pop this off here. Once we get on location, pop it off, you can set it down. It's machined really nicely. And then we have these little screws, or I don't know, screws, bolts, whatever you want to call them. You can just bolt them right in there and change how the pad lives. So if I'm on a rock surface, I can put 2 of these in and just have the back resting on the rock, and then I can level it with that. Plus, you have a ball head working. So this has come in really handy to shoot a lot of different ways. And a Platypod, just by itself with the screws and the little kit, it also has, the way it's machined, you can run, it comes with a strap that you can strap it around a pole or around a railing or on a chair. It became a really handy thing. When I first bought it, I used it just a little bit and I put it away. Then I started thinking about it more, and this is kind of like a little MacGyver deal. So anyway, that's pretty cool. And just so you know, because I was posting about Platypod so much and how much I was using it, I am working with Platypod now. They let me, they send me some new stuff, and I supply them with images for their advertising. So I am in with them now. Let's see, what goes after that? After that, oh, let's just move up in size. So a little thing like a Joby. This is a little Joby guy. It's called a GorillaPod. And GorillaPods are pretty cool in that, let's see if this is high enough. Probably not. No, not high enough. Okay. So you can take these and wrap it around a pole, around an arm. These are very stiff. They can stand up. They come in different sizes, and it has a little ball head built into it. And these sell for like 60 to 90 bucks, maybe a little bit more if you get a really big one. But these are quite handy to have. Again, small, easy, light, and variable. What's that? Oh, I heard somebody.
I think that might have just been some feedback. And we still have no questions, but this has been very cool. So thanks, Bob. I appreciate it.
Okay, you got it. Yeah, it was when I did this last not too long ago for another group. I was surprised at how well it was received, and people were like, "Hey, that's pretty cool." So, if you do a lot of outdoor photography, landscape stuff, is that too high or too low? I can't see. Let's see if we take this over on this side.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so this is going to totally the other end. This is the Photo Pro E6 Eagle series, and the legs are very stiff. It's a very light tripod, but it's not you don't get this if you're just going out occasionally. This is a going to work because the legs are waterproof and sandproof, so you're not going to get stuff inside the legs. The machining is very, very nicely done, and something that I really like and had never been exposed to before was I'll see if you can see it. It has a little leveling head right here on the top. So once you've set your sticks, you can then level the tripod. There's a little switch on the side there. So that comes in real handy. It's set up to be a gimbal head. So I was talking about when we chase down the birds and things. This is a fluid head here, and you're able to set the tension over here on, so if I let go, it's still there, but it's very easy to move. So I can set the tension exactly how I want it. And same thing for here. This can be tight and harder to move, or it can be just really slick and easy. So fluid head, if you've ever done any video or worked with it. This tripod also allows you to shoot straight down and straight up, which is quite handy. So if you're doing some macro stuff, and we were talking about shooting macro, remember this is a 100 to 400 with a 2x extender. So in full frame jargon, this is about a 1600 millimeter reach as in comparison to a full frame lens. But you can see how smooth and easy it is to track and play. One of the things we were talking about with the, I can probably do that on another, I have another piece of gear too. When you're doing your panoramic photography, you want to make sure that you're not pivoting around the camera base. You want to pivot around the light entry point or the nodal point, depending upon who you talk to. It's got a couple different terms, but basically it's where the light enters the lens, and you want to pivot around there. So you want to have the capabilities of moving your lens back and forth. And I probably wouldn't be doing any panoramas with this, so we'll talk about another one. So anyway, this is just a beautiful lens, and I'm really enjoying that one because I chase birds a lot and do a lot of wildlife photography. And I don't mind carrying this one around with me, again, because it is light and it is really stiff. Let's go back over here. Got another one. Here's another Platypod unit, but here's something that you can do for your macro. Platypod makes two different sizes. This is a bigger one. You can see. Whoop. I gotta put this on the other side, don't I? Okay, you're wondering what all this stuff is hanging off of here too, aren't you? Basically, those same machine screw setups that we had there, you can have your camera mounted on a tripod, and then mount the platypod on your tripod. And again, remember I talked about it being a MacGyver-ish kind of thing. You can add some gooseneck arms, and then you can have a way to, you know, do a little lighting for your macro stuff. So you have an extra set of hands working there. You could put clips on the end of these goosenecks. You could put the lights on. These are Lytra lights, which can also serve as an emergency beacon if you get stuck out. And we probably don't want to do that too much. So anyway, it just shows that there is a lot of, you know, handy stuff that you can do with these guys. And I know we don't talk about, you know, with gear when it's not such a big deal, but camera straps. And I'm finding the camera straps, you know, when you get out there and you're in the wind and your camera strap is there and you're like, okay, I need to wrap it around there. And it's a real pain in the butt because it's, you know, throwing a lot of windage up on your camera. I'm using Peak Design straps, and right there with just a couple little clicks, the strap is now off the camera. So, and the nice part about that is the little catches can be on all of your cameras, so you can move your camera straps around to different cameras and they have different styles and stuff. So I'm really a fan of that as well.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
we have a request for more information on your gimbal.
Okay, so yeah, and I'll be talking about another gimbal in just a second. That particular gimbal comes as part of that tripod. That gimbal head comes as this E6L. It's PhotoPro USA. I think the E6L, like I say, it's a bit pricey. It's like $1,400, but it's got the gimbal head. It's got the up and down. It's light. It's stiff. It doesn't, you know. So it has a lot of beautiful features. What's that expression? You get what you pay for. So this is, I didn't think that it was that great. And then I started using it more and more and more. It's a beautiful little piece of kit. Let's talk about another gimbal then. Excuse me. Let's pull this off. So since we're on gimbals, let's pull another gimbal out here. Well, I don't have a plate on there. I thought I did put a plate on there, but basically you see here, we have the same idea. We have a way to up and down and go across. And then there's also another piece to this that goes here so that you can set it for click stops for doing panorama stuff. Having click stops on your camera, again, which is built into that other one, having those click stops is nice so you can set it to be exactly X number of degrees and you can just feel it click, take a photo, click, take a photo. When we're taking our panoramas, I highly recommend that you turn your camera from horizontal to vertical. That gets you a higher or taller image as opposed to being really thin going across. You can get a little bit thicker. And we could also do 2 rows, which brings me to the next piece. Whoops, don't want this to fall on the floor, so excuse me a second. Okay, so if you already have a tripod, one of the things you can do is just get yourself a piece of kit. These are, there's a lot of different companies that make these. These are called panorama heads. And what a panorama head does is it allows you to, it allows you to maneuver your camera. So remember I said we want it over where the light comes through the lens. So this particular unit here, this is from Neewer, N-E-E-W-E-R, and I think I priced it out the other night and it's about maybe 60 bucks, 70 bucks. But watch what happens with just a little twist. We can move the center point of the lens over the center the center column of your tripod. When you do that, and I'll show you why it's important when we put together an image in there, when you spin your camera to do your things, again, you're pivoting around the light point and where the light entry point is. And when you do that, you don't end up getting all these weird things when you go to process your files out in like Photoshop or whatever program you're using to put your stuff together. So this makes it real easy to do that. And then when I've just mentioned that, oh, maybe we want to do 2 rows, you can also, where is that? There's another unit where we can take the camera up, and we know it's still on the same nodal point. And now you've got basically a tilt shift lens. Oh, wait, it didn't tilt. Oh, yep. If you go here, it can also tilt. So if you do this and tilt it back a little bit, you can do 3 rows. So something like this allows you to do up to 3 rows of stitching. And why would you want to do that? You want to make really large images. This enables you to do that even if you have a relatively small megapixel camera. So enough about that stuff. Let's go back into sharing and show you why some of this stuff is pretty important. Let's see, back here. Share the screen, share. Okay. So when you're making your panoramas, you see how this horizon is perfectly straight across here. Here are the individual images. Oh, let's get this thing out of the way. Okay, so we've uploaded these images into layers in Photoshop. And the way to do that is to go to File, Scripts, go down here to Load Files into Stack. So load files into Stack. And when you do that, it'll ask you to navigate to a folder. So we can navigate to whatever folder or whatever image you need to do. You would gather those images. You would say, yes, I'm going to cancel out of this right now. But you would say yes, and you would say, okay. And when you do that, if you're making, you would use this setup for both, this would be used, oh, this is the wrong one. Negate this, remember this setup, but this is for stacking your images for focus stacking. And we're gonna do that in just a minute. I can't open my Bridge program because when we work on Zoom, it just uses too much memory and tries to crash the program. So I'm not even gonna open that. But within Bridge, or I believe even in Lightroom, you can select the number of images like you would here, and you would say, go ahead and photo merge. And when you say photo merge, it'll give you a dialog box. And unfortunately, again, I can't show you that, but the dialog box will ask you, do you want to do that automatically, or do you want to do it? In this particular case, if you've done your capture with your images on the pano head, like I just described, and you're very close already to having nice verticals as you go through the system, you can say, go ahead and do it as a cylindrical. And the cylindrical one will leave you this. When you're building your image, it'll say also, do you want me to automatically do content aware fill? And you can do that. But what we're gonna do here is I'll show you how the content aware fill works. We're going to take all of these images. Now notice again, Photoshop built all of these masks to blend everybody together. So let me turn all the masks off. And you can see it's got, it's got a little bit of, little bit of different exposure and stuff. Photoshop goes through and helps you blend all that stuff together. And look at how nicely that plays. So if we're going to go ahead and fill in, if you don't want to just crop in, you can fill in these areas using that content aware fill. We're going to merge all these together, and I call this the, you kind of the mash the corner, Shift Option Command E for Mac, or Shift Alt Control E for Windows. And look, it takes all of these layers, combines them together, and puts them up on its own layer. Once this is up on its own layer, you can make a little selection across here. And when you make that selection, you can go to Edit. Under the fill area, there's a spot here that says Content Aware Fill. And it gives you this nice little menu right here. So you can, it's where it's the green, it says we're going to use that green, we're going to use that area to decide what pixels to put up in here. So with the, if you notice that it has a little minus sign right there already, we're going to take some of that off because we don't want to use it all the way down to there, and we don't want it to get confused over here. So we'll kind of make sure that that's all sky going up there, make sure that's clear. And then we've got that there. Once you get there, you say, you know what, that's okay. You say okay, and it does a little bit of thinking. And boom, that whole area is now put onto its own layer to start with, which is kind of nice, so that you can check and make sure that there weren't too many duplicates or whatever. Then you can hit a Command or Control E, Command for Mac, Control for PC, and we can go in and merge that down. And it does a pretty nice job of replicating the pixels as necessary. If you see a couple of things in there, like right here, we got a couple of lines that are repeated, we got a little bit of smush there, that would be a job for the, let's see, the rubber stamp tool, the clone tool, and put that at 100%, nice soft edge brush, and just go in and clean those things up. Anytime you have little replications in there, it's kind of like evidence that you've, it draws attention to itself. So you can take a little bit of that out, and now everything looks, pretty nice and clean all the way across there. And you kind of just check it and make sure that everything's okay. And if it looks a little weird, again, you can just add a little bit of, let's add a little bit of blue up there just to make sure it looks a little bit different. So that gives you an idea, and then you can continue. You can do that on all 4 places, or you could have said, go ahead and fill in the content aware fill immediately, but then you don't see exactly where it is all the time. So any questions on that? Well, you guys are sharp because I don't hear any questions, so we'll go on.
No, but I'm
All
looking,
right.
I don't have any questions for you, but that's fun. I sure appreciate you going through that, Bob.
Sure, not a problem. Okay, so I'm out hiking, and you can force perspective and make things look the way you want them to look. If you look here, see this little ledge and this little water coming down here, it's just dribbling. It had rained a day or two before when I went out on the hike, but I really liked this area and I thought it was pretty cool, and I wanted to feature this. And we can cheat as photographers. So this is an overview of the image, just straight out of the camera, looking up there. So then I took it and put it together a little bit different. So that's that same little waterfall. So in order to get this flow of water, Olympus now has in their newer cameras neutral density filters built in. So I was able to add 5 stops of time to this image. So you saw how little water was flowing, and you now see how much I can create there and play. So that's pretty much the straight out of the camera file, which brings me to a point. This looks pretty overexposed. Whoop, whoop. So since it's overexposed, what I'm finding is if you expose to the right, ETTR, expose to the right of your histogram, you will have more information and cleaner information to work with because let's bring up a if we look at a curves layer, most of the noise in a file, and this is with all files, not just Micro Four Thirds, but I have to be a little bit more aware of it because again, we're working on a slightly smaller or half size the chip of a full frame. Most of the noise is in this 3/4 tone area. Most of your great information that's wonderful is up here in this high the high 3/4. So you got your quarter tone and then your 3/4 tones. If you can move your information up here, you won't have to move information up out of here and try and recover stuff from the shadows. When we first started digital, we were always told, oh my gosh, whatever you do, don't overexpose. Well, with raw files, we now have a lot more information to work with, which is just makes it absolutely amazing. It's a really big difference. So I'm going to run through this really quick because I know I wanted to do some macro stuff as well. But let's just take a quick little look. Kind of just added a little bit of a glow to there. Went into here, and what we did was we took this and using, remember I told you about luminosity mask? Well, this was a mask that was made via luminosity and adjusted a little bit by me down here. I was able to, you know, you can see, if you ever want to see your mask, hold down the Option or Alt key and click on it. This is what was done there. So we had a gradient run across and then bits and pieces. So where it's darker, we're taking more away. Where it's lighter, we're allowing more to come through. I do my dodging and burning via a soft light layer. So a soft light layer allows the manipulation of the highlights and shadows, which to me, everyone says, look for the light, look for the light, look for the light. I say, look for the shadows. And if you can create better shadows, you will have more depth, dimension, and tone in your image. Just look what happened. All I've done here for the most part is adding a little bit of density to the shadows, and just look at how much more that's coming together as an interesting image. So we'll move on here. This is a multiply layer. Multiply is like adding one full stop of darkness, and screen is on the opposite side. That adds one full stop of light. So you can see I've only allowed a little bit of that to come in there, but it's another way to get some darkness in there without stressing your pixels. And we added a little hue saturation layer there to beef up this color just a bit through here. And you can see, again, when you look at the mask, you can see where that saturation is being added. Turn it on and off. Let's go up another layer. So in here, this was what I call a fix-it layer. So see these bubbles here? Do we really need those bubbles there? I don't think so. Did we really need that little divot in the rock and things like that? So I'm going to go ahead and clean those things up. I did that on that layer. And then we went up and brought in a little bit of darkness in the for the clouds. Again, using a multiply layer, but I only used 1/3 of a stop down. And I did that by making this 37% opaque. So the opacity of the layer is 37%, which means it's 1/3 of 100% approximately. And that gives us 1/3 of a stop darker in the sky, which, adds the blues, a little bit of curves to beef up and brighten up the waterfall there, a little bit more hue saturation. Again, another multiply layer, about 1/3 of a stop. Let's see, we're almost done there. And then last but not least, see that little hot, your eye will go to the area of highest contrast. This was bothering me from the very beginning when I started working on this image. There was no detail there at all. I tried to clean up some of it. and couldn't, couldn't make it work, and then went, okay, I'll fix it the rest of the way. So I cloned in a little bit of information there. I am not one to worry about whether an image is perfect to reality or not. Obviously, since this waterfall is really only about that thick or about that high, this is, telling a different story, but it's the story I want to tell. I'm not shooting for, environmental magazines or things like that. So any questions on that before I erase that bad boy?
I don't have anything coming in on the chat.
Okay, good. Okay, so we talked about one thing. Just have a little thing. I was able to pull this down from my Instagram real quick. We were talking earlier about macro lenses. This was shot with the 100 to 400 and the doubler on there. So again, about 1600 millimeter. Look at the detail that was available in here. I never knew that, because I've never got that close to them. I never had that kind of reach before. So this was kind of amazing to me to find, all the detail in there without actually pulling out a macro lens and that kind of thing. All right, so let's go back into the scripts. See, load files into Stack. We talked about that. Let's go ahead and do that. And we need to go over to the browse. And let's go Evergreen, macro, praying mantis. So I'm here at the images, and there they are. And I'll go ahead and click them all in, and it says open. And what I'm going to do is see where it says here, attempt to automatically align source images. Yep, I certainly want to do that. And I don't want to make a smart object yet. I wanted to see how it works, and we'll just say, okay. So I made these files a little bit smaller so that we could process them pretty quick here. I found this little guy in my my mint. So this is a mint sprig in my garden in the back, and it's probably about that big. So that praying mantis is probably, again, this big. So taking a excuse me, taking a macro lens, and then I've made 15 images of this guy, and we put the 15 images together. They're being stacked right now. And then I'm going to let Photoshop go through and create the sharpened image. So if you look, this is the back image. So, our praying mantis is obviously way out of focus. This area here is in focus, and then back here it's out of focus, but that's fine. I don't care about back there. Remember, the same thing as when we had the grasshopper. I want that, way back there. Okay, go. I guess maybe, even though I made smaller files, this might be a little slow. So I may have to go to a pre-done file for you. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to cancel this out. So that would, remember all the pictures of the masks being made? They were layered together. They were, remember, they're different sizes. When you change the focus, it's going to change the size of the image a little bit because it's moving the focus a little bit. That needs to all be adjusted. So let's go in and get to, wake up. There we go. So this was, if you hold down the Option key, it will turn off all except the layer that you're working on. This was the finished image once it was all put together. So there's some things here that didn't quite work. It looked like during that entire exposure, this antenna was moving. So we didn't get any detail of the antenna, and these guys all have two antennas, so that's not nice. We've got these little black, black marks on the inside there, got some little things happening there. And because your eye goes to the area of highest contrast, we've got these black spaces in here that are really dark, that are really pulling attention away from our subject. So first thing I want to do is let's ease up on the marks that were on there, bring in some detail and some other leaves, if you will, and then bring in a another antenna from one of the other images that I made. When you're photographing these guys, especially, I mean, you're photographing a living, moving subject. So I had to spend a lot of time and, you know, a lot of missed shots, you know, because he was like in the middle going, no, I don't think I'm going to stay here anymore. But anyway, we moved on, adding a little bit of a sharpening layer, and there's many different ways to do that. There's software that will help you with that sharpening. There's actions that you can get, or you can use Unsharp Mask and then just really crank it up and only allow it to come through via a luminosity layer. Again, if you notice, I only sharpened the leaves and the subject here. Which will bring me to, let me show you something really cool. Photoshop is now working with a really nice feature. It's called Select Subject. So you know how hard it is to get around a lot of these things? We can just go Select Subject and allow Photoshop to do most of the heavy lifting. Look, it's got, here's the marching ants going around our marching or non-marching praying mantis. So it wasn't perfect. We've got a couple of things in there. All you do is go back to the tool and you can hold down the shift key to add to the selection or to take away from the selection, and go back and forth until you get all the selection done the way you want. Actually, I want this whole thing undone there. Sorry.
See, Bob, while you're doing that, I've got a question for you about, are you changing your focus manually for each image?
No, I am not. That's a great question. Again, the newer cameras from Olympus and from Lumix have the ability to say, go ahead and I want to make X number of images. In this particular case, I said, make it 15. It made 15 images and it moved it in an increment of 1. And you can choose between an increment of 1 to an increment of 10. The reason that there's no specific number is you'll have to experiment with it is because every single lens and aperture combination that you use is going to be a different mathematical possibility. If you have a Canon or a Nikon, you can use a thing called Helicon Focus. That's a software that you can hook up to your camera and your computer and have it run that way. The nice part about the Olympus ones was, let's say I was shooting flowers. You need to be able to allow your if you're going to use Flash, Studio Flash, you need to allow the images to, or allow your flashes to recycle in between each shot. And if you're making, 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 shots, then it needs that 2 seconds. So it can go through and go shot, 2 seconds, move, shoot, 2 seconds, shot, move, and it'll go right on through automatically. That was a feature that I fought for when I was on the Panasonic team. So anyway, I'm not going to get crazy with the actual extraction here. You get the idea that Photoshop can do most of the heavy lifting for you, and then you can go back in and do your final diligence there. There we go. And then last but not least, a nice little vignette kind of drives your eye back in there. So some recommendations for when you're shooting macro. If you don't have the automatic setup and you really want to do a lot of macro, I would look at the Helicon Focus. They have a couple different setups where you can buy, like, try it out, buy it for a year or buy it for a lifetime license. They have a couple different ways you can check that out. If you have some of the newer cameras, I believe that's starting to work its way into the other, excuse me, mirrorless cameras. But it's already in the Lumix G9, the GX85, Olympus EM1 Mark III, the bigger one that they have from Olympus with the about the 1DX, not 1DX, that's Canon. There's anyway, they have you have to find the ones that work, but it's an incredible feature. Now, the thing is, once you have that ability to step through the focus, you don't necessarily have to push your aperture down to f22 or 16 where you're starting to get diffraction and diffusion happening. You can shoot in the sweet spot of the lens. So if you have a macro lens like when I was using the Canon 100 millimeter 2.8 macro, that was an awesome lens at like f7.3. And you can find the sweet spot. Each lens, I'm sure, has its own. I'm still finding some of the sweet spots on these, but it's somewhere between 5, 6, and 8 usually. And that's where you're not getting any diffraction or diffusion. You're using the sweetest piece of the glass that you can, and then you're stepping the focus through, and then you're using Photoshop or whatever to take you to that next level of blending just the sharp bits together. And it's pretty amazing because your eye doesn't see that way. So when you create an image that has that much detail and that much depth and dimension, it's pretty incredible. How are we doing on time?
Well, I think we're after 8. What is it? Oh, 8:13. I don't know how everybody's doing. I didn't even notice the time because I was enjoying this so much. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Very kind.
If anybody has maybe, do you have more to say, Bob, or do you want to
yeah, I can. Let me give you one more example here. What do we got there? Okay, yeah. So I'll just show you some quick examples of some stuff and not get crazy about it. So this was a focus stacked image of my wife's Christmas cactus. It's showing up a little bit underexposed here. So I'm gonna go down here real quick and just put a little curve on there and open it up just a touch. Whoop, that's better. But that gives you an idea that you can come through. This is a Christmas cactus flower is maybe about the size of my thumb, possibly, maybe just a little bit bigger. And it's amazing how big you can get. So we talked about how that's possible. Let's look at the layers palette for that. So again, these were all the masks that were made by Photoshop for us to put together. Now, when you're working with, one thing to watch when you're working with white flowers or areas that don't have a lot of contrast and detail, Photoshop can have a hard time figuring out what is the sharpest. So that's the beauty of having these masks available. You can go back in and say, oh, you know what? It's soft right there. You can go into the mask, find the spot where it isn't soft, and use your own tools to to finalize the selection a little bit better. And then you can go in and layer things together and put them together well. So just to give you an idea, this was kind of the setup to light this guy. So using that platypod with the gooseneck arms, and these are Lytra lights coming out, and then you can watch it here, and then allowing the camera to go step through, and you can figure out where the sharp bits are and make sure that you've got a sharp enough image from front to back. The nice part is you can go to the front of that stack or the back of that stack, and then you can say, ooh, you know what? That didn't get sharp far enough back. And you would want to be far enough back sharp rather than not far enough. Even if you went past and decided, well, I don't want to be that sharp back there, you could pull some of those images out so that it wouldn't be sharp back there, and then you can get that depth of field look where your subject is set off against the nice bokeh. Let's see. So we'll get rid of those guys. But again, when you're shooting that macro stuff, and again, you don't need to buy a macro lens, although some of them are very, very reasonable. and can work quite well for you. And you can get attachments like we were talking about a little bit early. Let's see, that was the macro stuff. That was the water run. One more thing. There's a thing called the median filter, and you would use that same technique that we were just talking about with loading files into a stack. And let me show you, let's see if that's the one. Okay, so there's a possibility of shooting a time lapse and then blending those images together to get rid of noise. So that's using the median filter. I'm just gonna, this was up at Lake Powell and put together, and just using, this is what they call the holy grail, going from dark to light or light to dark, the holy grail of time lapse. And the way to, you normally, if you're just shooting with aperture priority, which is how I was, when you shoot in aperture priority, you'll end up with a lot of flickering. And you notice there was no flickering in that at all. Well, the, where is it? So I took, the lack of flickering comes from an app called TLDF, and you can get the TLDF light. That's time lapse deflicker. You can get a light version that doesn't give you as many options, or you can buy it for $30, and it will smooth out. Because if you're allowing the camera to decide, and it gets a little bit more light or a little less light, it may be a full third of a stop or a half a stop or even 2/3 of a stop different between different exposures, especially as you get things like sun coming through. But if you look at this image, see how smooth these clouds are here? If you look across here, this is all smooth. This has all been smoothed out. That's by stacking the images together. And then once the images are stacked together, you go to filter, noise, and then median. The first thing you would do though is after you stack them together is you would go ahead and save them as, or put them together as a smart object. Because once they're in as a smart object, then you can go to the median filter and it will ask you some the correct questions to blend them together. And then once you say okay, it only records the same pixels that are there. So if something's been moving like water, you can use this technique. If you do enough images, you could make Grand Central Station appear to be empty if you took enough photos, just because there wouldn't, at some point it would say, hey, no, there's movement there, there's people there, it's nothing repeated there. And so it's a pretty cool little filter to be aware of. And I think that's probably, you know, unless you want to go play some more, I think that's about what I got for you today.
Well, thank you, Bob. That was excellent.
Good.